20th, or maybe it's, I don't know, Sunday, June 17th, and you're watching this because you have nothing else to do. So you're watching this interview, or candid conversation, as we call it, about church planting. And I'm Pastor Dan Erickson, and our guests tonight are Terry and Barb Sonnentag from North Hope Church in Aurora, Minnesota, not Colorado. But they're here to just talk about some of the experiences they've had and explaining about the church plant, which most of you are aware that a new church has started there, which is kind of, that's news on the Iron Range. We don't start new churches every day, and but there's a lot of exciting things that have happened already and that we think will be happening in the future. So let me pray, and then we'll roll along. So, Father God, thank you for tonight and the chance we have to be together and share the ways we have seen you at work in recent weeks and months, and to think about, again, just the task to which you've called all of us to go and make disciples, especially here across the Iron Range. And pray that our conversation would be encouraging and challenging and glorifying to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, well, let's, why don't you guys say a little bit about yourselves as, like, you can say your names if you want, again, your family, like where you came from, and then a little bit about North Hope Church and how it got started. Go ahead, Barb.
I'm Barb Sonnentag, and I am originally from Fort Frances area, Canada. So I came to college in the cities and met my husband at Crown College. Some of you may be familiar with that. And yeah, we moved up here in 2009, 2010, and not knowing that we were to start a church eventually, but God called us up here just for certain reasons of just change of life, and focusing more on family. And we started with North Star in Hibbing, just attending and getting involved in leadership and stuff there. And they were praying about starting a church, planting there, and we thought, well, we'd be interested to help, not knowing that God was going to call us to be pastor and pastor's wife. So eventually God laid it on our hearts to be the pastor and pastor's wife at North Star in Virginia. And from the very beginnings of North Star, Virginia, we knew that we were a church planting movement or church, and that was our heartbeat, was to continue church planting within the Iron Range or wherever God had called us to do. And so from the very beginning of North Star, we set aside funds and prayed for people to be raised up for the next place to church plant, whether we were looking in maybe Cook area or Aurora, White Lakes, North Shore. We were just praying, God, show us. And over the many years of being at North Star in Virginia, God continued to lay White Lakes, Aurora on our hearts and confirmed that within the last couple of years. And I'll let Terry share how that kind of came about.
Yeah, after this past winter, we were talking that maybe we should have went to Florida, or somewhere warmer. But yeah, no, we had planted in Virginia in 2012, so we had started the process of getting prepared for that in 2011. And I used to be in the IT field for quite a few years, and then had left that and just focused on the ministry full time. And so there was a transition to that. There was a lot of learning, a lot of pain in that process of it as well. And then, but yeah, over the years then, we had partnered with Dan and others here at the Chisholm Baptist, which has been a blessing. So in many ways, Pastor Dan has been a mentor along with a lot of these other pastors who are part of the group that we get together monthly. So that's been a real blessing.
Yeah, we don't have a real good name for the group, so it's even hard to we only need to give it a name, like Charles Henry or something like that.
Right. Right. Yes. But yeah, so then it was, like as Barb said, that we started to put money aside since we planted back in 2012, which, 2% back then of $600 a month didn't amount to much, but it was a start, and it really had more to do with our heart of where we wanted to be, and that's what we're doing already in Aurora, is putting some money aside, a percent for church planting and a percent toward missions as well. And so, yeah, and then it was in 2015 we really decided more about focusing on planting. We had talked about these things, and then I would say by 2017, we had rolled out what we had called our Vision 2020 of trying to focus on what we called the here, there, and everywhere. And the here was the church in Virginia, the there was the future church plant, and the everywhere was specifically for us anyways, it was reaching the unreached people groups. And so we had begun to set goals and different things of saying, by 2020 our desire was to have 100,000 raised for a sending out of the church plant. And so by God's grace and just, very grateful that happened. So we were planning on planting in 2020, but just with COVID and everything, it really put all those plans, it made it pretty impossible to try to go meet new families and to do outreach events when, nobody wanted to come out. So, or very few did anyways. So, but yeah, so then the church, we saw, and really we had been praying for years of that God would raise people up, as Barb said, families that could be a part of the church plant to raise up people back in Virginia as well. And then, and then it was in September that we had officially, were sent off. And then in December 5th was our first Sunday together as North Hope Church in Aurora.
Okay. Maybe just to summarize, because this is this is a very intentional goal, and you started 2011, 2012, North Star Church in Virginia. But right away, the whole idea is within less than 10 years, we're going to start another church. Mm-hmm. And at that point, was there pretty much understood that you would be the pastor of the new church, or that was always you might be the pastor of the new church, someone that we might find someone else?
Well, they were voting us out, so we figured we better go there first. No, actually, I think in 2015, 2016, our hearts were, I think just our giftings were kind of leading us toward that direction. And so, we were planning on that. And I think we maybe announced that probably in 2016, somewhere in there, that we would probably be the people who would be going to plant. And so, maybe it was 2017. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
2018, 2019.
Yeah, I think we were praying for leaders to be raised up, and as Terry and I prayed more and more, and things just started happening, we felt called, like maybe we're to be the ones, and we're kind of like confused with God, like why would you call us out of Virginia when we're pastoring to go? But we just know that with the giftings, like Terry said, just the evangelistic gifting that he has, and the outreach to communities and stuff, and then the elders were praying too, and some of the leaders in the church, when Terry had approached them about potentially feeling called to be the new church plant pastor, the elders completely confirmed it. So God just made it very clear to not only us, but to the elders. And that was like 2017. And then we had to approach the congregation with it, which was a little bit harder to do because we had been their pastor from the very beginning. It was hard for not only us, but I think for some of the congregation leaders. But we have since got their blessing, and they are very supportive. So we've been grateful for that.
Yeah, but again, a very difficult thing, because you guys started North Star, Virginia, and really after that first 5 years or so, things were going for a new church really well. And then you're saying, well, we're going to kind of just disrupt this, and we're going to leave. And so that's been a challenge, but we'll talk more as far as what would cause one to do that. Well, let's just give us a little bit about what's happened in the last 6 months or so in Aurora, how this has come about and what's going on.
So, this past summer, I would say it was around June that we had started forming a launch team, and and again,
what's a launch team?
Sure, yeah, a launch team is gathering some people who will help us start at the new church plant, and so I think that one of the challenges is that because the two cities are so close from Virginia to Aurora, is to encourage the people in Virginia to see their need to be in Virginia, to help there, because, as much as we like it or not, it's just, there's a lot of, the church's personality has often, and that's not just at North Star, but I think for anywhere, but a church's personality is often around the pastor that you have as well. And so whether people like the pastor or not, I think the difficulty sometimes is that when there's change, people don't like change. And so anyways, yeah, so in June, spinning forward to this, in June, we were starting to form a launch team. And really, it was pretty amazing that in the years that we had prayed for God to bring people to be a part of this launch team, here, 3 families who lived over by Hoyt Lakes in Aurora and around that area start coming to North Star back last February, and another family who just moved up from Princeton down by the Twin Cities moved up to Hoyt Lakes. Like, who does that? And anyways, it was so cool to see some of these things happening. And so they were super excited to be a part of the church plant, never knew anything about it. And and so we ended up starting to meet together, this core group of people. And we spent time just praying together, driving over to Aurora, Hoyt Lakes. And we really decided that area because we saw the need there, and talking to other people as well, and just really opening our ears to hearing what's out there, where are the needs, and just hearing that over and over from different people about that Aurora Hoyt Lakes area, and just that there's not a lot of evangelical presence over there. And so that really drew our hearts to that area. And then this core team, we started to go over to Aurora Hoyt Lakes and just spend time praying there and asking God to prepare that city and to prepare us. And so that we continue to meet. We did a parade. We were at the July 4th parade. We had our float, and really we had only met for 2 weeks as like a launch team, and we were like, hey, let's get into the parade. And so we really scrambled to get a float together and different things. And and then we did a kids club in the summertime, just trying to get to know more people out there. And that was a little bit challenging because for people to drop off your kids for like a VBS or a vacation Bible school type thing, that when they don't know who you are, is sometimes challenging. And because here we are, just a brand new church, and we really didn't have a building at that time or anything. And so then that led us, we continued to meet.
I think a lot of people thought you were Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, that could be. There was a lot of, people have question marks of who are you? Are you a cult? Because you say you're non-denominational or whatever. There's just a lot of question marks there. And so anyways, then in September, or actually it would have been in late May, we started doing church plant training. We had Tim Mackey come on over and had spent time with us as a whole group on a Friday night, Saturday at the community center, just training us on different things, preparing us as a group in a sense of what we need to be considering as we're planting. And then we started meeting September, whatever that was, that following Sunday that we got let off, or when then they sent us out, and we started meeting in the community center in Aurora. And here, there were some new families right away that jumped in and started attending. And we just continued to meet at the community center and just really working out a lot of things because, there's so many aspects of a church plant, from who's going to shovel the snow to just greeting all the different ministries that you think of that go on there, ordering up communion, the trays for serving communion. There's so many different things there, creating a new bulletin, creating a new logo, just all these things that kind of came into play. And just, organizing the church, like, say, becoming a 501c3 and all those different aspects. So there's a lot of things that had to take place in the background, and forming a worship team and trying to get, find people who can actually sing together and all those things. And so at the community center, it was a very nice location that we started meeting at, and then we stayed there until about mid-November. So, yeah.
I was just going to mention that the whole Aurora area, too, kind of confirmation with that is Terry and some pastors and leaders of the church, and maybe even one or two from here, had gone on like a drive, like prayer drive. And this was even before we knew it was going to be Aurora. Went on a prayer drive throughout the whole Iron Range area, went up the North Shore, went to, Hoyt Lakes, all the areas. And they actually stopped at the building that we're at, because they saw that the parking lot was open and it had been vacant there for quite a while, so they stopped and prayed there. And then you guys had said that, they prayed and they just said, wouldn't this be an awesome, church building? But we knew it was probably not on the docket for getting. And then before Terry and I actually felt like we were going to be the new church plant pastor and wives, we also drove over there. I remember the year prior, on Mother's Day, he had taken me out to Giants Ridge for dinner, and we drove over there. Our kids were with us, and we just drove in the area and just prayed. We just sensed God wanted us to pray, and we stopped in front of the school there. And if you're, he's going to show a picture. I don't know if you can see.
That was from Mother's Day, probably.
No, that wasn't. That was we did another prayer, but we stopped and in front of the school, and we just prayed in front of the school, and then we looked, and on the school sign, it says, where there is no vision, the people will perish, and it's out of Proverbs. And I just remember just that, the Lord was just speaking to us, like, we need to keep a vision of Christ here. We need to bring that vision for reaching the lost and, building the kingdom of God in this area. And we just felt like, for us, that was confirmation that we're supposed to be here. So, anyways.
Yeah, I was going to say, we had spent probably like a couple years prior to that going over there. A group of us on our Sunday night prayer time, we would just take these drives over there and just pray through Aurora and Hoyt Lakes area. And and the building that we ended up eventually getting, I know it sounds crazy, but we had sat at the picnic tables outside the building and just prayed together because we didn't know where else to sit down and just pray. And we're just like, God, this is an amazing place, and if it ever is that you would have us to have this, let your will be done on that. So,
okay, why don't you quickly tell the story of the building, just so
sure.
Now that you've brought it up, let's get it over with.
Yeah, so the building that we had looked at was the Blue Cross Blue Shield call center just on the edge of Aurora there. And anyways, I think it was like maybe 2 years ago I had called and they had asked, or I had asked them about, if we were ever to lease it or whatever, and they said $10,000 a month plus utilities, and obviously that's not going to happen. And then anyways, when we were in that church parking lot that day praying as a group of pastors, it was like the very next day, somebody within our own church body had said, hey, the building's sold to a person and he's open to renting it out or selling it. But at that time, he wanted $4,000 a month or $450,000 to buy the building, which again, either of those, way too much. And it was pretty cool. Teddy Kessanen, Travis Peterson. I took them over to another building in Aurora just that was on the market for sale and asking them from their construction background, do you think this is something we should consider? And they said, no, this is not something you want to stick a lot of money into. And so just feeling very broken because here we are, knowing that we're to plant, but we don't have a building to meet in. And so anyways, with that, we got on our knees outside that building. We had looked at this other building in town, and we just prayed, saying, God, open the door for where you would have us. And it was pretty neat. That was a Thursday. That's Saturday was our church plant meeting. The owner of the building happens to call and just says, hey, we want to sell you the building. And I said, well, it's great, but it's too much. And he had said, no, we're going to sell this to you for $120,000. And a pretty amazing, I mean, it really is like the insurance company came out and looked at this, and we actually can't insure the building for what it's worth because they said it's a moral risk that they see at times people burn these kind of buildings down to just recoup the insurance money out of it. And so it was kind of a crazy thing, but yeah, God certainly.
Yeah, how many square feet is this building?
It's 10,500, and the building was built in 2002. I mean, it's a commercial building. It's an amazing place. And I should actually, if you don't mind. So this is the community center that we had first met at. We loved meeting there. The city was making it a little difficult, saying that they were not interested to keep renting this out. We had only been there for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they said, why is that you guys, why did they...
Enough of this, they said.
Well, and we were taking great care of the building. It wasn't anything about that, but it just seemed like there was a lot of resistance. And, just we wanted to do different events in the city park, and they'd call us and say, you need to, if you're going to do any organized events, you need to take it to city council for approval. So if we wanted to go up at the picnic table and just do a Bible study there, no, you got to bring that to the city council for approval. So there was just a lot of resistance there. But anyways, here's our 5-day club that they had going on there in the community center that we started meeting. That's our church plant training. This is our float from the 4th of July parade there that that was our little church plant crew there. So a little variety of folks, and Barb and our daughter had the horses in the parade with them. And this is one of our outreach events at the Fisherman's Point. The city had canceled. We wanted to do a fun event in the park, and they said no. So we just did it over at Fisherman's Park instead. And this is at the Oktoberfest that they have, or Pumpkin Fest, I guess they call it, where you decorate light poles in town. And so we did that. We participated and volunteered when they had these games and all this on that particular Saturday. And so we were a part of all of that. So just trying to get to know people in the community, get our names out. Here's the community on the inside, the community center, and our little worship team getting started off up there. And then here's the building, right, that we ended up purchasing in the middle of November, which was amazing. And so, so that guy, who called me that day, the owner of the building, that Saturday, we went and met with, because our whole church plant crew was there. So we went there to meet with him, and him and I stood outside talking, and he had said, my wife and I were talking about this on Thursday, and said, we just need to get a hold of you and get it sold. And that was the day that Travis and Teddy and I were praying together on our knees. So it's like, it was like when I told Teddy and Travis, they were so amazed, as I was too, to just see the timing of some of these things that were taking place. So here, here's just the snapshot of the building. There's the picnic tables that I had mentioned that we were praying at. And honestly, we would be staring through the windows as if, we were looking into, like, as Caleb was looking into the new land of, like, hey, maybe this could be ours. So, but yeah, and here's the chairs that we were moving on over. There's different churches that have been such a blessing to us. A place down in the Twin Cities that we reached out to had all these round tables. And, they wanted $450 for them. And anyways, they call us back and said, now, what are you guys doing with these? And I told them, and they got back to me and said, we want to donate all this stuff to you. And we've got other things to give you too. So, and then there's another church down in Buffalo that donated a ton of stuff as well. And so it really has been a blessing, between tables and chairs and just all the things that, like the little kids' tables that have the, adjustable legs and everything. It was just such a blessing. And so here's our little group. Our first night that we, the day we closed on it, we had, it was the following day or that day, we had a little group of us get together and just pray together. And there's our group there, our launch team. And and then this is like during our Christmas time here, one of our services, our fellowship hall with those, like I was mentioning, those tables and chairs and all that stuff. And then here's some of the projects that we've been working on. We have, which is a blessing, it may not seem like much, but the last few Sundays we've had 18 kids in our children's church, which is a huge thing for us. Blessing, and so we were splitting up a little room. It used to be the cafeteria room or break room, and to make that into another classroom, and just different projects being worked on right now, making a nursery, and so that's kind of what we've been working on. So
Cool. And
and then another huge blessing. Let me just back up. Well, you tell, honey. I've been talking too much.
Well, I just remembered Terry coming home and, was thrilled that this building came about and that it was going to work out and that he dropped the price. And I just remember Terry coming home and just saying, it's wonderful, praise God, but 120,000 is 120,000. And he's like, I just don't even know how we're going to make that possible. Because even if we were to get some of the money, we still have to pay for utilities and all this stuff. And so I think it was like the next day, Dan actually called Terry and was talking on the phone with him. And you had asked Terry, how's the church plant stuff going? And I think Terry had mentioned the building and just said, but Dan, I don't know if it's going to be possible. And then, Dan, why don't you tell him what you told him?
Well, that would be nice, Barbara, if I could remember anything.
If you don't remember it, make it up.
But through the process, as we talked about the possibility of a no-interest loan that would allow you guys to have the cash to buy the building without, because again, being what could have been some, fly-by-night organization, a bank may not have been terribly excited about giving you a loan even, for it. So, and we ended up that we would give you $75,000 as a loan to get that paid off, and you guys raised the remainder within your circle, and you own it.
Yeah.
Until we foreclose.
Yeah. It was amazing. $60,000 was raised up actually it was within 4 weeks. It was amazing, you guys. Unbelievable. These are things that are God and not man. It's pretty amazing stuff. So,
and to build a bare bones structure, anything like that would be.
Yeah, crazy expensive. The building.
700. You could build it. No, you couldn't build it for 700,000.
Well, that building there, the insurance company said is $2.3 million is what they, estimated the building to be. So
worth, and you got it for 120. I'd say that it's a great building. It's basically one large open area, which is kind of a little divider in the middle. And then Terry has this really big office, a study, and it does a lot of other things, a conference room. But then kind of again, because it wasn't built as a church, it was built as an office building, and they have a whole bunch of tiny rooms, which don't have a whole lot of value unless you're going to have like 2 kids in your Sunday school class. So one of the things you're going to have to figure out is how to, and again, remodeling isn't exactly easy because of all the parts of the infrastructure, but you'll be figuring out the best ways to utilize that building for the church and for the glory of God. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, if you have a chance to be over there sometime, call them up and see if you can see it, because it's really, and I know sometime Brian's going to take the bus on Sunday morning over to North Hope Church, and those of you who don't have any responsibilities here, you can hop on the bus and spend a Sunday over there. Let's turn the corner just a bit, and this all sounds great, but why in the world do we need another church on the Iron Range? I look in the paper, there's all these churches. Most of them are struggling, don't have enough people. Why do we have to start another one?
Yeah, and that's a common question of you're only going to hurt the churches that are already existing, that are there. And so, there was some that we approached and just talked to because some of them were, not functioning very well. They're, kind of hanging on by a shoestring. And so we just wanted to find out, are they ready to close, where we could potentially take the building and whatnot. And I think it's difficult because sometimes people who have attended a church for 20, 30 years, maybe they even built it, they have a really difficult time letting that go. And so if I could say it like this in a kind way, but sometimes, there's a reason why they are dying off, and so that is difficult to join forces because sometimes the leaders of the church like it that way. They don't want to see a lot of change and different things going on. The other thing really for a church plant, though, is that it is such an effective way to evangelize. The statistics, from numerous church planting organizations have shown the high percentage of numbers of people who come to know Jesus often will have that within a church plant because they're very focused on evangelism. They're focused on church growth because you don't have anybody, So there is a huge need there. And we're seeing that already with some of the families that we have coming now who don't know Jesus, showing some spiritual hunger. And so we're prayerful that kind of fruit will continue on. Because I think as the church grows older and you have more, hey, we got kids ministry, we got women's ministry, we've got men's ministry, we've got, all these different types of things. And what can happen is that you're really focusing on ministering to those who are in-house, which you should. But as a young church plant, you don't have a lot of those ministries because you just don't have the people. And so you're really focused on outreach. You're really focused on building these relationships within the community and really being intentional to that. And I think just as the statistics show, that as time goes on, a church becomes more inward focused, you know what I mean? And I don't say that in a negative way because there are a lot of things that need to go on in the church where you're building up and equipping people as well. So, but yeah, that's a huge thing. Yeah.
But yeah, let me make a couple of comments. One is and I remember before we even, I think we knew Terry, but before Terry was part of our pastor's fellowship, the other BGC Converge pastors, we were talking about this, and we said, well, what, Aurora, the Mesabi East School District, Aurora, which Aurora Hoyt Lakes is kind of the center of, there's really not much happening there. The First Baptist Church of Aurora, which 30 years ago was a pretty active church in the community, has for whatever reason, shrunk to just a pretty small group of older people that gather, and they love the Lord, but they aren't having much of an impact on the community. Grace and Truth Church had done a lot of stuff over in that area. They moved. They moved from Aurora to Virginia. So as far as evangelical type churches, you have the Covenant Church in Bowabic, which again is also kind of an older group of folks. And then you have a very small Assembly of God in Hoyt Lakes, I believe. Yeah. And so there just wasn't a lot of other stuff happening. And part of it, this is the Iron Range. People from Aurora drive to Hib-Tac, every day. They certainly could drive to Chisholm to come to church, and they could. But the one problem when people are traveling 30 plus miles to their church is that when they have neighbors and friends in that community, it just seems it's more difficult to invite. Well, hey, why don't you come with me? If say we're living here, why don't you come with me to this church I go to in Aurora? And you think, gas is $4 a gallon. You want me to drive to Aurora to go to church? So it's really in making disciples, to talking to people who are not believers, or people who maybe are believers but don't have a church home. It's really nice to say, well, this is it's right in Aurora, right here. And I think that's why it's wonderful to have, again, a Bible-based, gospel-centered ministry right in the heart of that Mesabi East School District. And I think God is going to do a wonderful thing.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I agree with that. I think it's exciting. You know, we're hoping to work with other churches in the community as well, like the First Baptist Church, you know, and working with them perhaps on some kids ministry things, because as their leaders are getting elderly, that, you know, we would hopefully be able to help and encourage the ministry as well and be a part of it. So there's certainly not like opposition or anything like that. I haven't felt that toward other churches or that they have been that way toward me. It hasn't been that. I really see that we come alongside them and help do the ministry that's going on there.
I think, too, with a new church plant, there's always that sense of curiosity, which, you know, if that's how you draw people in, that's how you draw people in. Whether they stay or they don't stay, or they come and they hear the gospel message and their lives are changed just in that one time they came, or they continue to come. But I think also with a new church plant, it allows for more people to feel like they can get involved because it is new, and we don't have, you know, and we don't just stick anybody into like teaching and leadership roles, but they can be on the fellowship table. We've had several that have already, you know, come as newcomers and want to be involved just because they want to feel a part of a family. And in that, we're able to say, hey, why don't you come to our Wednesday night Bible study? Or we have a study that's starting this Tuesday that's, you know, a Christianity 101 type. It's a new beginner, you know, even if they're not Christians. So for them to get involved in that way, sometimes I think when they come to an established church, they don't feel like there's room to get involved because there's already leaders established in those areas. So we've seen many people have come through the doors and they want to get involved, or we say, here's a need. Let us know if you're interested. And it's been really great to see some of them get involved, even not being Christians.
And there's a lot of unique things about church planting in a rural area. But I know that, just to affirm what Terry and Barb are saying, that from our denomination, Converge BGC, certainly believes church planting is the way to, one of the best ways to expand God's kingdom. And I know, like, they would say, for example, let's say we're in a metro area and we had a church of 200 people and we wanted to do a better job of reaching our community. They said, well, you could, you know, work really hard and maybe a few years later now you'll have 250 people. Or you could take 50 of your people and say, go start another church. And now you've got 150 there and 50 over there, but within a few years, that church with 50 people is probably going to be 150 people, and your church maybe will be back to 200. And so the best way to grow it, at least in a metropolitan area, seems to be to divide. And there are a variety of reasons for that. It's a little different in a rural area, but I think we've highlighted why at least this particular church plant is a great idea. So.
Yeah, and not that numbers are all, you know, what we're looking for, because lives, you know, people's lives transformed for Christ is the main thing. But I think through that you do see more people coming through the doors because they want to know, what's this new church all about, and then they hear the gospel message. And like, we just had a couple new gals this morning that we were able to spend time talking to and praying with, and they haven't been to church since they were little, and they felt very welcomed and one is dealing with some health issues and just asking for some help of some sort, and mostly she just wanted prayer today. So, you know, the lives are what we're, you know, hoping to meet, you know, like, and transform lives, but definitely the numbers are showing too. And we've been very blessed. I mean, I think our numbers have been the last couple Sundays in the 70, 80s. So
this is a church that started 4 months ago in Aurora, Minnesota, and 70 or 80 people are attending on Sunday. Again, the numbers mean nothing other than they're a reflection of,
Yeah, one thing I was going to say, what's really neat is to see some of these folks who are coming through the door. One couple that comes, they came December 5th, our very grand opening, our first Sunday, and they've been with us every Sunday. And I asked, how did you guys hear about us or whatever? And he said that he drives over to Two Harbors and he listens to a podcast, Joe Rogan, and he said, he was interviewing some guy that was, apparently went to church, and he seemed like a smart guy, so I thought, maybe we should go to church sometime. And so he hadn't been a part of a church for 20 plus years, really, and what's so neat is here his wife is talking, because after about a month being there, I'd asked if they have a Bible or anything, and she said she did. And she said, but I think my Bible only has the Old Testament. For one of my, I'm told I never even knew I had what the difference is. And I'm thinking through my head, I don't see too many Old Testament Bibles, right? And so as she's talking and sharing that she's been reading and whatever, I said, well, I wonder if your Bible might have the New Testament. And she's like, well, how would I know? And so I was able to show her, here's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and whatnot. And so you do see how God really is bringing these people at times, that it's not like we're advertising and all these different things. A lot of it is just, seriously, it's crazy things like that. But it's also, I think, when somebody comes through, like this one gal Barb was talking about, she started, and this one gal brought her friend with her, and she was supposed to come with her the following week too, but that friend has never come back since, right? The one who did the inviting has never come back, but the gal she did invite has been showing up every week. And this week she brings her friend with her. And so you see crazy things going on. So, yeah.
And I think, at least in our group here tonight, most folks are a little on the older side. And we probably really don't realize what people, the average person out there who doesn't go to church and is under, say, 45 years old, how little they know about the Bible, about church, about anything. And I suspect if you ask, like what is Easter about? You might get answers like, well, I think it's where we celebrate Jesus' birth or something. I mean, they really don't know.
Right.
And so there's a lot of, it's introducing things, some very basic things. Oh my, the clock moves too quickly. But let's talk a little bit about just making disciples, which is interesting because that's, as a church plant, that is what you are about. Reaching out to people, helping them become believers in and then followers of Jesus. And at Chisholm Baptist, that is, we've refined our focus we want to be very intentional in our disciple making. And you've been working with us, and again, church planting in Virginia. What have you learned about people on the Iron Range, about people who are not believers, people who maybe are believers but don't, or say they're believers but they don't go to church? About people on the Iron. What are you learning about people on the Iron Range who aren't involved in a Bible believing evangelical church?
I think the biggest thing, and maybe this goes for a lot of areas, but I particularly see it more on the Iron Range, is way back when we started, even in North Star, Virginia, people want to see that you're willing to extend a hand before you ask for their heart, in a sense. They want to see a practical Christianity, and if they don't see that, they don't want to come back, or they don't find that they're going to get involved because
they don't care what you say if they don't
Right.
See that you care.
Exactly. So that's what I've seen, and I see that more so in the Iron Range, because we're just so used to work hard and get it done, and and I think just being able to extend a hand, whether it's going to their house and helping them, put up some walls, or cleaning their house, or inviting them for coffee, or taking him. Terry's taking a guy fishing tomorrow. So just getting to know your neighbor and caring about them is a big thing in church planting.
Well, and I was going to say, moving up on the Iron Range, we used to live in Monticello. I grew up in Wisconsin over on a dairy farm.
Wisconsin, really?
That's right, Dan. Yeah. And
you say Stanley? Stanley, Boyd, Wisconsin.
That's right. So, yeah, moving up here.
Are there some Packer fans who live there?
Absolutely. So, in planting, in moving up here, what I notice in the Iron Range is that you have a lot of people who don't mind doing things themselves. Like if they need to remodel the house, they'll do it themselves. Right or wrong, they didn't do it right perhaps, but they still do it, right? So you do see that. What I see up here is how, like in my family, we didn't go to church often, but my parents went somewhat often, and my grandparents went all the time. We're up on the Iron Range. What I've noticed is that you have generations who have never really been a part of a church. And perhaps that's from the shift work that they've worked. Their grandfathers worked in the mines, and so therefore the wives didn't go or whatever it was. But I do see a lot of that. I do see, people, like this one gal who said that her Bible had only the Old Testament. She was confirmed and went through all of that. And now that she's attending church and she's reading her Bible, her mom, who used to kind of preach to her that you're going to church, now that she's wanting to go to church, she's like, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing that?" And so it is, right? It's changed in that way. And so, anyways, I want to give a quote out of a book that's called "The Gospel Comes with a House Key." This Rosetta Butterfield is the author. She said this: "Our post-Christian neighbors need to hear and see and taste and feel authentic Christianity. Hospitality spreading from every Christian home that includes neighbors in prayer, food, friendship, childcare, dog walking, and all the daily matters upon which friendships are built." And I see, honestly, that it is so huge that we, when we talk about discipleship, especially for those who are unchurched, like somebody had asked this couple who've been coming since December 5th, "Hey, would you guys consider coming to our Tuesday night intro to the Bible?" And he's like, no. He goes, "I only got Monday, Tuesday off, and I've got a lot of things to get done." And that's okay. But what has to happen is relationships need to happen first, where there's a trust, where then there is that step isn't so far off. I've never been to a Bible study. I've never done any of these things, and you're asking me to go to it, where if we just started to meet on the side, going out for coffee, or him and I are going fishing tomorrow, and we invited them for supper as well. Those are the small steps of finding out where they're at in their faith more, and questions that they have, versus sticking them in a group, because that scares them to death. For a new person coming into a church and they had never been there, like we have a guy who's been attending, he hadn't been in church for 40 years. That's a big thing. That's hard for them. They don't know what they're coming into. And so I think that is part of it, is welcoming them and not being pushy, and building those relationships with them.
And I do think it involves a recognition of these people who haven't been to church 30, 40 years. In their mind, obviously, they quit going for a reason. Mm-hmm. They'd been to church, and it wasn't doing anything for them. And again, it really doesn't matter what denomination you are. You've been there, you've done that, and it doesn't. You don't have the idea that, boy, I'm feeling some needs in my life, some holes in my life. I need to turn to the Lord. Yeah. I need to turn to church. No, that's not what they think. Mm-hmm. And it is a challenge for helping people say, no, you might have done a religion thing, but that's not what we're about. Right. This is about a whole new dynamic of the infinite personal God who wants to relate to us as his children. Yeah. And yeah, it's just it takes a lot to cut through some of those misconceptions.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and just, it's interesting. Last Sunday, this one guy has been showing up, and anyways, he's been going through some marital stuff for years and some bad choices. And he grew up in a Christian home. His dad died of cancer. It was a really long, drawn-out death, kind of like going down that road of dying through the cancer. And he had become very bitter toward God and hasn't been in church. And he shows up, and that particular Sunday, I was preaching about Stephen being stoned to death. I've been preaching through Acts. And I asked that very question, like, why would God take out Stephen? Why would he allow that to happen? Not that God did that, but why would he have allowed that? And that really hit home to his situation that he's in for many years of bitterness toward God. And it's interesting because he's had a past of, I think some criminal stuff or something, drugs maybe. He has come like 3 Sundays, and last Sunday another guy came, and apparently, he's not a churchgoer, and he said, I about dropped over when I saw this other guy show up. I can't believe he showed up. When other people are telling me that they were surprised this guy showed up to begin with, And so it's like, okay, so God is moving in different ways, and I do think, trying to understand their situation of where they left, why they left, like Pastor Dan was saying, and really trying to minister to show them who the true God is that we serve. Because a lot of times people get hurt by religion and not so much by the fact of knowing who God really is to begin with.
Do you run into people who don't think they're good enough to go to church because of mistakes and things they've made?
Yeah, well, I certainly see that. Certainly we saw that in Virginia. We see that in here as well. People who, this young guy who I was speaking of, whose dad passed away, he just said, I've done too many things in my life that God wouldn't want me anymore. And so a lot of that is, these guys have lived some really difficult lives, and especially when they knew the right road, so to speak, when they were young, and then they know that they left, and now even the thought of coming back, it just, the battle of the flesh, the battle of your friends that you have had for so many years that try to drag you down as well. And then all that doubt, comes in with the work of the enemy and just you being a bad counselor to yourself to begin with. So, yeah. So it really is trying to teach truth. It's loving these folks. It's a messy situation at times. I mean, praise God, this one gal that I mentioned who shows up, and I didn't tell you this situation, but we've got a gay couple. Is that okay if I talk about that quick? We have a gay couple who show up, and they've got 4 foster kids, and it's been very stretching for us because they really...
You mean 2 guys, not
a
happy couple.
Yeah, two guys, not happy. Yeah, 2 guys that are married, and they have 4 foster kids, and... these kids have been so, like when they first came, they were so traumatized from their past. And they only had one of the kids at that time, and then the 3 others, the siblings all came to the family. And I just remember the first Sunday, I went up and I said, oh, hi there. And I touched the person on their shoulder, and they just about like fell to the floor scared as if I was going to hurt them or something. And to see,
you said some power.
Yeah, maybe. But just see the smiles, to see what's going on, that one of the guys in the church has been tutoring the one in math and building relationships. And it's working through, I was listening to a podcast, and this guy who was on there is the author of a book called Messy Grace, but he also has another book called Messy Truth. And not that truth is messy and grace is messy, like God doesn't have it messy, it's just that we do, right? And so how do we minister to these gay guys who really have come more because they want their kids to have community and be a part of community. And it's like we don't want to condone what they're doing, but we certainly want to love them. But I'll say within the congregation, people, it struggles. You know what I mean? We struggle with that. Like I have never been faced with that. I've known gay people, but never have they been in my church consistently coming and hearing the gospel message. And we've helped them and served them in different ways. These kids, the one boy who's like 10 years old has asked for prayer. He fell in the gym and hurt his head, and his dad, or the foster dad came and picked him up, and he said, is this when we should pray? And the foster dad's like, well, I guess. And then one of the little girls was having eye surgery, and the boy again says, should we have the pastor come over and pray for her? And so my wife and I went over there and prayed with them, prayed for the little daughter. And so these kids are asking all kinds of questions. They come from the Native background. And so as Barb was teaching a few Sundays ago, the one girl said, now, is this the same God that natives worship? And so there's all kinds of questions that are coming. And so these are things to pray for us and pray for them especially. Here's another crazy, one of the gals who's been recently showing up and really has a spiritual hunger, and her friend invited her to come, right? And she came, and now her friend doesn't come. And her friend told her last Wednesday that she's coming to the Bible study, and here she didn't show up, and she said, here's the reason I'm not showing up. She called her friend and said, I'm not showing up there because I read their statement of faith, and they believe that God has created man and woman and that they're immutable, and that a man and a woman should be married. And she's like, I can't go to a church like that. And so this new girl who's been comes to one of the girls that's kind of been discipling her and says, no, this church doesn't believe that, do they? And she's like, well, yeah, because that's what the Bible speaks of. And so we thought, well, maybe she's going to head off as well, which would have been hard to see, because she's been there for 4 weeks. She's got a great spiritual hunger. She's been reading her Bible. She has a Gideon Bible, and she clipped out all these little sticky things to show where each book of the Bible's at. And she has such a hunger. And she said, well, this is difficult for me, she said, to know that this is where the church is at because I have a gay son as well. You know what I mean? And so this is the culture that we're living in a way of like, how do we reach people when it does get messy? You know what I mean? It would be easier and cleaner just say, well, you go find a church that does that, But I'm praying that God actually will work and change their hearts to see the loving God that He is. Because at the end of the day, we're not looking for them to change their behavior as much as we are to see God change their hearts. Because when God changes their hearts, that stuff will get dealt with as well. Because sometimes that's what we want, right? We want them to conform to what we're doing without a heart transformation. That's what we want to see, is that just like anybody else, we want to build friendships with them to be able to share the good news of who Jesus Christ is with them. So, anyways.
It reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday, which nothing to do with this, but there's a maternity home starting in Hibbing, and the gal's saying it's easy to get pro-life Christians to give money and to commit to pray for this. They're all for our project, but it's much harder to find people who will actually work with some 19-year-old gal who is pregnant and has a 2-year-old son already, who has no place to live, who has been off of drugs maybe for 1 month, and his life is a mess. And she uses swear words all the time because she doesn't even know they're swear words. She thinks it's just a normal way to talk. And to get Christians who are willing to be with those people, that's a lot harder. Mm-hmm. And because it gets messy out there. And sin is ugly. Mm-hmm. And these people, their sins or the people who have sinned against them have brought a lot of ugliness to these lives. But grace is able to go beyond that. Yeah. So are your people, the people who are part of your church, they're kind of ready for this, but maybe now they're wondering, is this a little more than we bargained for?
Well, it's been really neat to see some of the folks who are part of our church plant team, how excited they are. Just as we walked out to the parking lot today, I was walking with a couple, and they were so happy and excited as they're a part of this, because they said, and they said, it is messy, but it's good, because God is leading us, and they're being stretched, and we're being stretched in many ways of like, how do we love people when it just seems like certain sins are not as tolerable for Christians as others, right? Because really at the end of the day, we're all sinners, and we're all a mess in many ways that we've been saved by God's grace. And that's what we're praying for in these situations as well. But I would say, there are a lot of people within our core group, especially some who have attended saying, hey, what's going on with these guys, And then they get it. They're like, you know what? Yeah. I mean, we need to show them who Christ is. before we just say, hey, by the way, here's your sin. I don't know if you know that's sin, you know. And instead of showing that, actually showing their sin nature and their need for Christ, just like it is for us. So, yeah.
Cool. Barb, you want to say something? No. Well, we've gone an hour. That was kind of what I thought we would do. Is there anything else that you feel, boy, I wish we could have said that tonight? Like, we're going to give any shout-outs to...
Yeah. Well, yeah, for us, I just want to say thanks so much for you guys here who have prayed as a congregation to support us in the work that's being done there. So thank you guys for being prayerful and being encouragement. Just last week I had seen one of the people who attend here, and they just asked, they're excited, hey, what's going on there? And that encourages me that you guys know about it and you guys are prayerful and have been praying, just caring about what's going on there. So thank you for that. I do certainly appreciate that. I see really, and I had a verse up there that I think is wonderful. It says there, I thank God in all my remembrance of you, always offering prayer with joy in every prayer for you all, in view of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. For I am confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you, or he who began a good work in this church plant and in the church here, that God will perfect it, will bring it to perfection until the day when Christ returns. So
I was just going to say, we feel like it's, with church planting, and you guys have been a part of that too, and North Star has been a part of that. It's like you're birthing a child in a lot of senses. It's exciting. It's you can't wait for it to happen, and it's a miracle that when it does happen, and there's many blessings, but yet it's difficult too. So we do appreciate your continued prayers. We're very thankful for, the support, not only financially, but like Terry had said, your prayer support. And just even, individuals that have encouraged us has just been overwhelming. So we feel very blessed. So thank you.
One last thing I just wanted to say here real quick is this. Pray for our home church, right? The North Star Church in Virginia. Like Barb said, when a church gives, or when you think of humans, when they give birth, it's like there's the excitement, but yet there's pain, right? Because you lose families. And for the home church there, they've lost some good families. And on top of that, those sleepless nights that you would have as new parents, there's those pains of, hey, there's a new pastor, there's things that are different. And so pray for the church there, that they would be encouraged there and strengthened because of the good work that's going on in Aurora, right? Pray that God would strengthen, and that's what we pray, is that God continue to raise up leaders in Virginia, strengthen Pastor Sean, who spoke. I think he preached here this morning. Pray for him and his wife. This is there's a lot of transition for the new church there and the new pastor and everything. So pray, when you think about us, pray for them especially, that God would continue to strengthen and raise up more workers amongst their midst there. Because I'll tell you, that Virginia area is such a mission field in many ways. We have so many people who are moving into that area because the housing's cheap. There's a huge addiction issue in that area. And so there's a great ministry opportunity that God is giving us in that city there. And so just be in prayer for our church there as well, as you think about us.
Roger?
I did. I grew up in the country in Devlin or Emo area, but yeah.
So did you ever hear of Bethel Baptist Church in Fort
it
Francis?
It's right, I don't know, was it right across from a gas station? Okay. But I know that was the Baptist church, probably that one. Yeah. Okay.
So they
Okay.
Larson? I don't know. So our
Oh, yeah. Wow. Well, we definitely were praying, even us as a couple, about, I think it was several years even before the church, we started praying about Aurora. We prayed about, are we to go into Canada? Because there is definitely a need in that area. It's a difficult area right now because the mill has shut down. So a lot of depression and different things going on. So, and a lot of people have left churches, and so
even as we're thinking about Chisholm and Aurora, don't forget Fort Francis,
Yeah.
Ontario.
Maybe
Another
that's the
place,
next church plant.
another
Who knows?
place where people need the gospel, as they do in Stanley Boyd as well. Okay, well, we're going to call it a night. Thank you, folks, for coming, and for those of you who are watching. I was just going to say, I think this morning Pastor Sean was here. I was over at North Star in Virginia. Tonight, Pastor Terry's here. And we're just so grateful for numerous pastors across the Iron Range now who are united in our commitment to seeing the gospel of Jesus Christ be proclaimed clearly in all sorts of places, and that we're there to encourage and support one another as we do that, knowing that we live in challenging times, and the opposition is certainly more obvious, more outspoken, more evident than previous times, but the gospel is the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and then to all these Gentiles that populate the Iron Range. Okay, let's pray. Thank you, Father God, for tonight. Thank you for Terry and Barb and their commitment to bring the gospel to people on the range, especially now to the folks in that Aurora, Hoyt Lakes area and all those surrounding townships. We thank you for the good things that have happened so far as they've gotten the church going, and we just pray that that will continue, that you'd give them lots of wisdom as they face some kind of messy situations, difficult situations, and just help the grace of Jesus Christ to flow through them. And as they, again, seek to speak the truth to people who are so deceived by so many lies, we just pray that you will give them wisdom and sensitivity and boldness to do that. Thank you for our time together tonight. May it, again, encourage and challenge us to continue to work by your grace and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Good night. Thank you.
Thanks so much for you guys all coming out tonight. Appreciate that.